Hello and welcome. I am Amritanshu Rai and you're watching Law of the Land on Raj Sabha TV. Today we bring to you the Seeds Bill, which seeks to provide a framework for production, preservation and sale of seeds. To discuss the issue, I have with me Vandana Shiva, President Navdanya, and Sunil Matthews, Advocate, Supreme Court. Now for the headlines. The Seed Bill seeks to make registration mandatory to check the sale of spurious seeds. The bill seeks to advance legal framework to include private participation into seed business. The bill provides for compensation to farmers in case of seed failure, but provides for complicated mechanism to seek compensation. The Seeds Bill seeks to regulate the production, distribution and sale of seeds. The bill seeks to check sale of spurious seeds by making registration mandatory for sale of seeds. It is expected to ensure better quality of seeds and provides for compensation to farmers in a situation the seed fails.
Farmers in various states had used branded seed on the assurance that the output will be high, but the seed manufacturing company failed to deliver on its promise. The result was a failed crop affecting farmers, and eventually it was the state governments who had to intervene, providing for compensations to farmers. The Seed Bill seeks to create a framework to deter such incidents. The bill seeks to regulate the quality of seeds for sale, production and supply of quality seeds.
And the seed bill is to ensure quality of seed material to farmers. The right quality, the right variety, how to provide it.
The proposed bill established a central seed committee which may appoint as many subcommittees as needed. The bill provides for mandatory registration of all varieties of seeds. The seeds are required to meet certain minimum standards. In cases of registration of transgenic varieties of seeds, an applicant is required to seek clearance from Environment Ministry. But the compulsory registration is not binding for the farmers. However, they cannot sell any seed under a brand name. Under this bill, farmers can claim compensation in case of a faulty seed. Violation of the proposed clauses or forgery will incur a prison term up to a year or compensation up to 5 lakhs rupees.
They must be registered. They must have the certification. So both condition is not possible for the farmers. Only company people and the big people, they can manage and organize all these things.
The bill also seeks to facilitate import and export for a smoother production and supply of quality seeds. One of the essential objectives of the bill is to increase private participation in the seed trade. Reshma Roy, Rajya Sabha TV.
Ma'am, the first question to you is, 70% of the seeds used by the farmer today are their own. Then why do we need a bill to cater to the 30%?
Well, this bill is not about the 30%. It is about policing the 70% with a very, very malicious objective. We have an extremely good 1966 Seed Act to do exactly what this bill is claiming to do, prevent spurious seed from coming to the market. And we've had a very, very good performance in the seed sector while that law was in place. 1988, under the new structural adjustment and reform policies and World Bank pressure, we get a new seed policy, which has already done everything they're saying about opening up to the market. In one sector alone, in cotton, 95% of the seed is in the hand of one company. Now, the point is, farmers will not voluntarily become serfs to a seed corporation. And to push them into that dependency, you've got to police them, register their seeds, and I have watched this happen in the United States and Europe. The reason farmers are 100% dependent on corporations for seed supply is because farmers' seed supply and seed sovereignty has been destroyed through compulsory registration of the kind the seed law wants to bring in place.
Sunil, to bring you in, do you really think this bill is for the farmer or not?
Well, I think the objective of the Seeds Bill, I agree with Dr. Shiva, is that, you know, there's an adage that if it ain't broke, why fix it? And the Seeds Act was, by and large, set up a broad framework to cater to most of the issues. As far as the new intended legislation is concerned, well, it intends to cover three objectives: provision of quality seeds, ensuring that those quality seeds are provided at a reasonable price, and also encouraging private sector participation. And I think of the three objectives, the second objective is provision of seeds at a reasonable price. That's where
The price is nowhere mentioned in the bill, by the way.
it's not mentioned,
Price
in
is
the bill,
not
which is
mentioned.
why probably, in the ultimate analysis, you could say that, the farmers' interests are not properly taken care of. Because after all, if you are trying to enact a pro-farmer legislation, then the price mechanism is very important.
Ma'am, the question to you is, see, what's wrong if we really go ahead and include private participation in the existing market that we have, and to bring in private parties to get into seed, to get into better variety of seeds, to get better production in the limited land. After all, land is not increasing.
Yeah. The first thing is, this bill will not create that private sector participation. It's already there, and it's become dangerously monopolistic, which is why the issue of price control regulation becomes vital, and this bill won't cover that. Secondly, as the footage itself showed, place after place where farmer supply or the public sector research and breeding supply had been replaced by private sector seed supply without any liability arrangement, you've got failure after failure. Bihar, 400 crores of maize seed
BT
failure. Last year, the entire Madhya Pradesh in crisis with all the pulses supplied by the private sector but then distributed by the public sector, failing. And this is happening more and more. And it's in the nature of the private sector seed supply. Unlike the farmer who breeds for his field, or unlike the public sector with breeds for that agro-ecosystem, these companies breed for global markets.
Yes.
And therefore, they will fail in particular condition. The myth that they will produce more, we've just released a new report titled "The GMO Emperor Has No Clothes." The new genetically modified seeds are not producing more. Again and again, the crop failure is increasing, pest resistance is increasing, super pests and super weeds are increasing. And in any case, as our work in Navdanya has shown, the more ecologically dense and biodiversity dense your farming is, your per acre utilization of land is much more effective than in the monocultures that go with the monopolies of seed. If we are worried about food production, nutritional security, and livelihood security, small farms based on biodiversity with seed sovereignty in farmers' hands is the way for this country to go, and that'll have to be different from the way the US and Europe have gone. We have to create our own path on the basis of Bij Swaraj as we build in Navdanya.
I get you, ma'am. The point to you is, does the bill allow the farmer to remain as a preserver of seed? Because that is what the farmer has been doing over the last several generations. Does it allow, because merely stating in one of the clauses that the farmer is the preserver of the seed and the variety and the other technical aspect, does it allow the farmer to do it?
Well, one is what is stated in the law, and the other thing is how it's implemented on the ground. Now, as far as my experience goes, as far as hybrid seeds are concerned, the moment you introduce them into the market, then the farmer has his own seeds, and he has these hybrid seeds which are advertised with great fanfare that they have greater productivity, etc., etc. So the farmer then, an environment is created where the farmer, to earn more returns, or at least expected more returns, switches seeds instead of
earning part, Sunil, is fine. What I'm trying to get you to is, do we recognize in this bill what was earlier recognized in the earlier seed bill, that the farmer is the protector and preserver of seed?
Not to a great extent. I think there's just a bland statement that, there's a preservation of his rights, but I think it's very limited and very toned down.
Does that affect our
It affects
situation?
us seriously, which is why I created Navdanya. First, the farmer can't become the preserver of seed if he gets penalized under a very artificial system of standards called the DUS criteria, which is what the industrial countries use, which is distinctiveness, uniformity, and stability. Now, uniformity is not what the farmer breeds for. Farmer breeds for diversity.
Yeah.
So already by imposing an irrelevant criteria that comes out of a seed industry onto a farmer who must be a conserver, you have displaced the farmer's varieties and the farmer's role as seed conserver. For that, you need to recognize diversity as the objective of breeding. And that's nowhere in industrial breeding programs. The second reason why a farmer won't be a preserver is if you start putting burdens of registration, fees, etc., the farmer will just give up their varieties, which is what happened in Europe and America. Farmers said, why should we keep going to the authorities to take licenses for our seeds? It's like taking licenses for your babies. If the babies had to be born with uniformity, all blonde and blue-eyed, Indians would stop having kids tomorrow. You know? So if you want the farmer's role in conservation and preservation, you have to first give them the freedom to save.
Yes.
And second, reward them for conserving and breeding diversity. All of that is missing in the thinking and the law, and will definitely be missing in the implementation.
On that note, ma'am, it's time for us to head into a break. When we come back, we will show you how the bill improves upon the existing law. Welcome back. The seed sector is presently governed by over 24 legislations. This proposed seed bill seeks to provide synergy and transparency to cope with the changing facets of Indian agriculture. Let's look at the existing legal framework and what the government proposes to do through the seed bill.
The seed bill proposes to change the law on seeds to bring it in tune with existing environment of evolving technological developments. Plant breeding, agricultural technologies and formal seed markets have changed the agricultural practices in the last few decades. The private sector now has a larger role than ever before.
The private sector's importance has been further enhanced by government not wanting to do much through the public sector at the moment as the policy and the attitude stands.
Let's look at some of the changes the government proposes through the seeds bill. The existing law only identifies horticulture seeds, whereas the new seeds bill expands the ambit and includes horticulture, forestry, cultivation and plantation of medicinal and aromatic plants. The existing Seeds Act deals only with notified varieties, while the seeds bill deals with all registered varieties. The existing law does not have provisions for transgenic seed. There is also no provision for a mandatory certification. The deterrents in case of an offence are not adequate. The disciplinary causes are insufficient to curb spurious seeds. There is no compensatory mechanism provided for in the existing law.
The earlier seed bill was developed at a time when there was not this kind of scenario. And the biotechnology has added a new dimension also. Apart from the Plant Variety Protection and Farmers' Rights Act, the Biodiversity Act, which also under Article 8J, the original Biodiversity Convention, clearly recognizes the contributions of tribal and rural women and men to biodiversity conservation.
Despite being tabled in Parliament in 2004, the bill is yet to be approved. The bill failed to be approved even after being 3 go-ahead granted to it by the Cabinet. Even the change made by the Standing Committee has not helped alter the status of the bill. Reshma Roy, Rajya Sabha TV.
Yes, ma'am. My question to you is the compensation bill. This is what the bill seeks to do. There's also this point being made by ministers and the government that this is for the first time that we are providing compensation in case a seed bought from a private sector fails. Do you think that is good enough?
Well, what we need is not compensation but liability. And so far, the government has resisted from allowing a liability clause, in spite of the Select Committee demanding that. And it's not only because the seed might fail, because it wasn't tested in adequate diversity of climatic conditions, but the new problem that transgenic seeds bring is the problem of cross-contamination, the problem of genetic contamination. Now, our cotton has been totally lost because of this genetic contamination, and the loss to the farmer who never bought the seed, but whose field was contaminated. Yes. And that's particularly important given that the future of food and production is organic. With climate change, with water scarcity, with farmers committing suicide, with all of that, you've got to shift to organic if you're a reasonable government and not in the hands of a corporate pocket.
Right.
Now, organic will lose its capacity with this contamination issue. In Spain, organic farmers have stopped growing maize because of transgenic maize contaminating their fields. That issue of genetic contamination and liability hasn't even been addressed in this bill.
Compensation and the mechanism provided in this bill.
Right.
Do you think that's because the farmer is expected, in case his seed fails, he is expected to approach the consumer court and then get his grievances redressed. And the compensation provided is max at 5 lakh rupees. That is if he manages to succeed in the consumer court. Do you think that's just the right kind of platform to address a serious and a grave issue like seeds not working?
Well, I think the fact that you relegate the farmer to going to the consumer commission or invoking the consumer redressal forum is itself unfair, because I think the very area requires special attention, and you need to have a separate redressal mechanism in the form of a compensation committee. But the problem is that this existing bill it's very easy to state an objective, but you have to provide specifications and you have to see that it implements well on the ground. As Dr. Shiva said, that in the event of crop losses, and when you're looking at transgenic varieties, you are looking at severe ecological implications. And in case something goes wrong, the losses are huge. You have to provide that the farmer, in such cases of crop failures, compensation is not based on the seed packet costs. It's based on the crop losses, which accrue to him. Also the turnover of the company. These seed producers, especially the multinationals, they're dealing in billions of dollars. And unless you make them accountable for something as severe as a crop failure, in terms of severe compensation such as based on turnover, based on crop losses, you will never properly address the compensation issue to farmers.
And
What is the mechanism?
And
Yes,
one
ma'am.
other issue. This bill needs to be read with another bill that is being tabled, the Biotechnology Regulatory Authority Act of India.
Yes, ma'am.
Which on the one hand takes away the power of the states. After all, Nitish Kumar had to say, but you must seek my permission before
Yes.
allowing these trials. And Jairam Ramesh was forced to recognize that the original
power of the
EPA
state,
laws give states a right. But the second thing that BRI does is say no one can go to a civil court on these issues. It will be decided by a tribunal. Now, you're telling the farmer, go to a consumer court. In transgenics, you are saying, go to a tribunal on which the biotechnologists will sit and decide. You are creating total closure of justice for the farmer.
On the mechanism bit, what, according to you, should be the right mechanism?
I think what we need today is a seed sovereignty law, which puts at the center the farmer's role as conserver, preserver, and farmer's freedom at the center, and puts the violation of that seed sovereignty as the issue that has to be addressed. That's the new context. The new context is not quality of seed. That's addressed in 1966 Seed Act. The new context is farmers are being threatened by high prices, monopoly, transgenic contamination. That new context means put seed sovereignty at the center, then see what are the attacks, have clauses on contamination, on liability, on antitrust and monopoly. These are vital issues to be addressed. Anything else is just an excuse to hand over our seed supply to multinationals.
On that note, it's time for us to head into a break. When we come back, we will show you what agricultural scientist Dr. M.S. Swaminathan had to say about the bill. Welcome back. My colleague Reshma Roy spoke to agriculture scientist Mr. M.S. Swaminathan and began by asking him about the highlights of the bill.
Now, therefore, this particular bill aims to regulate the commercial transaction of seed, what kind of quality it should be there, and so on, and ensure, unfortunately, the bill doesn't relate to price. Some of us I gave a number of amendments, and among them was one, government should have some control over the price. But there is a feeling it is a free market, demand and supply will determine the price and so on.
Seeds bill is in favor of the private sector rather than the farmer.
Well, I think the Ministry of Agriculture had wanted a bill which will create more investment in plant breeding. Now, obviously, a private sector person will be able to invest money either his own or through equity and so on, only if they can give a proper dividend also from the return. So they will look at the commercial aspects, how much money.
Almost 30 legislations are there covering the agriculture as well as the seeds sector. Was there any need of another seeds bill?
The aim of this seed bill is essentially to ensure the quality of the seed. The Plant Variety Protection Authority only looks at whether the variety, what they call novelty, true breeding and so on. But in this particular case, how to ensure the quality of seeds available to farmers and to give some incentive to those who enter the seed business, seed technology and business, how to promote it. So I would say finally these 3 or 4 bills, the Seed Act, the Biotechnology Regulatory Authority Act, the Plant Variety Protection and Farmers' Rights Act, and the Biodiversity Act, these all should be mutually reinforcing and should be compatible with each other and not contradictory.
Ma'am, you are in favor of having the farmers be at the forefront of any legislation. I accept that point. But the point here is, are the farmers ready to take on the technological changes that are happening across the world?
Well, the point is, if it's a wrong technological change, I don't think it's right for the farmers to follow it. I think pushing chemicals into farming was a wrong technological change. Chemical-free farming is doing better, giving farmers higher net income, and giving us better food, and giving us more food, as our experience shows. Secondly,
can the farmers tackle
but
technology?
Farmers have proven to be participatory seed breeders. You've got a new generation of breeding, whether it was for chemicals or genetic engineering, where it's assumed the farmer has no brain. What farmer has given us over 10,000 years of breeding makes modern breeding absolutely negligible. But because industry wanted control and wanted farmer to be a consumer and not a breeder, and definitely wanted to deny the conserving role of the farmer, they wanted to make the farmer just a buyer of seed. And basically, I've had debates with these companies who say, oh, our seeds allow the farmer to stop thinking. Now, that's not a good trait. A farmer should be able to think, to assess, to evaluate whether the seed is good for them.
Are we ready for that?
Our farmers are ready. Our farmers are ready. Our government is lagging behind.
The point to you is, how do you provide for the points that have been brought out by Dr. Shiva? How do you provide for such issues to be brought into statutes?
Well, I think one thing has to be kept in mind, that if the basic objective of this legislation is protection of farmers' rights and also to encourage innovation in the sector, then there has to be a balancing act that all regulations and all enactments have to achieve. And that is bringing in technology, bringing in innovation, but also preserving the farmer's right to choose. I choose not to opt for this technology. I choose to go with what I have. Has to be a choice that is preserved. And the farmer, at least a situation shouldn't be created where the farmer is forced to opt for a new technology because he believes that the market for his own conventional variety it won't be accepted, or a situation is created where he'll be just bought out, or there is no market for his. So unless that choice is preserved, that his variety or his seeds are given protection, and he doesn't have to opt for new technology, unless that is achieved, you get into a whole conundrum of issues.
Ma'am, the question to you, the question I want answered is, do you think the sector that is actually holding on to the technology or is practicing technology, the agricultural scientists and the hubs that the government has created, it is under the public sector units, do you think they are being able to do their work properly? And that is where we need to focus on and not let it go into the private hands, the research and development and the technological aspect.
You've asked a very important question, because I think what we need is a stronger public-public partnership. We need to recognize farmers have been breeders. At this point of climate vulnerability, the only seed available that is resilient to climate is what farmers have bred. Our public sector has put food security first, not profits first. But if you look at the last decade, the Cotton Research Institute of India, which is the most sophisticated cotton research institute in the world, hasn't released a single new cotton variety for all of Vidarbha.
Why is that happening?
Pressure. Pressure for the same reason that is being putting this bill into a narrow straitjacket. Pressure to allow the market to become a monopoly. Second, Rajasthan government signed an MOU with Monsanto, which means all the research would be handed over to Monsanto, all the genetic material and seed wealth would be handed over to Monsanto, and we would work as extension agents to sell their seeds with their intellectual property, not the farmers' breeders' rights, not the breeders' rights of our public sector and the common public rights that this holds. We had to build a huge campaign. I did a Bij Yatra through Rajasthan on Quit India Day, the 9th of August. And that pressure eventually forced the government of Rajasthan to withdraw. But that pressure is in every state. The instructions came from the Prime Minister's office. Sign deals with this company. Now, these same instructions are telling the public sector, stop doing your work. Don't breed for the farmer. Just becomes a seller. So our money, 75% of the Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana, 75% is going to buy the seeds of these companies and give them to farmers. Farmers think it's coming from the public sector. But we are using our public money to provide a subsidy. And these are the issues that need to be unraveled in parliamentary discussion.
Thank you, ma'am, for joining us, and Sunil for joining us on this discussion. It's time for us to end the show. You can email your suggestions and comments to law.rstv@gmail.com. You can also watch our shows on the YouTube. We will be back with a new issue and a new episode. Keep watching Raj Sabha TV.